Hello, this is Null Inquisitor, and today's video is going to be about a recap, uh, Game Master's note, uh, thoughts about last night's game of All for One Regime Diabolique that I ran for Francois Letarte, Anthony Boyd, and Ivan Mike. Um, you can watch the game on this channel. It was very fun as a game, so much fun. I hope it showed on the live play. Um, so here's my recap, my small recap of the game itself, and some notes about the setting, the Ubiquity game, and random stuff. So here we go. The story, if I divide the story into three acts, um, in the first act, they met with Mademoiselle Anne. Uh, they would later learn that her name is not Anne, but Louise Lafayette, Louise de Lafayette, to be exact and precise. And they received their mission from Monsieur de Treville, which was to go to the front in the city of Strasbourg and basically protect this woman as she went on a quest to talk to her childhood friend, Capitaine Daniel Daufroy, in order to clear his name, to make sure that his reputation is intact and possibly in the future not push the king, but um, encourage the king to send some reinforcement uh, in Strasbourg. So in Act 2, our musketeers and Lady Louise travel to Strasbourg and find themselves into a military camp at the center of the city near the Pont Couvert, three bridges that are found in the city of Strasbourg. So they find themselves in this cavalry camp searching for Capitaine Daufroy. And while searching his tent, some Bavarian spies entered and tried to kill them all. Briscoe rolled up Louise under the bed. They fought bravely. Martin was hit twice in the back by a Bavarian spy, a treacherous man, treacherous fellow, but he ended up pushing the guy outside the tent and finishing him with his fist. Philippe, I think, went untouched. His defense too strong, and he was able to take down a couple of these spies, while Brisker did all kinds of crazy maneuvers, such as jumping on a bed to spring and tackle a guy, trying to push a guy against a chest on the ground, trying to make him fall. Um, yeah, he fought like he lived. Giscard is full of surprise and not the typical musketeer. So after, at the end of this act, Mademoiselle Louise read some information by happenstance, coincidence, or the intervention of God himself. She discovered in the journal of Capitaine Daufroy that he was supposed to have a meeting at Notre Dame de Strasbourg, a big cathedral found in the city. So at the beginning of Act 3, we saw in slow motion our heroes ride towards Notre Dame de Strasbourg to find Capitaine Daufroy. They entered the cathedral and they found this this cavalry officer, Capitaine Daufroy, lighting some candles and looking very ill and tired and sweaty. So as they interrogate him, Captain Daufroy was kind of aggressive towards Lady Louise, pushed her and kind of shouted, "You should not be here, go away." And he tried to use his rank 5 of captain of the cavalry to order the musketeer back to Paris, to no avail, of course, because musketeers are musketeers. And this is when a woman in a white dress uh, landed softly on the hotel of the cathedral and kicked a cross, a metal cross on the ground, to show some disrespect to God, and started to recite some verse about having a heart filled with darkness and no love. I took the lyrics from a song from Jorn Lande. Um, I don't remember the exact song, but it's from the album dedicated to Dracula, so very appropriated. Um, so they started to fight this lady. The lady just flew off the hotel right in Brisker's face and punched him so hard he was knocked back uh, almost 10 feet and into wooden benches and tumble around, and it was almost enough to knock him out flat. But Brisker was just exhausted. He raced to his feet and tried to move around, and combat was pretty much over for our ladies' man. He had sustained a couple of injuries earlier with the spies, so he was still not solid on his feet. So Martin tried to cast a spell, but spells in All for One are time consuming, and in combat not often practical, as we later discussed. He did, in the end, provide some holy water to Captain Daufroy to wash his unholy affliction, and Philippe just rammed through the encounter and in 2 rounds cut deeply the vampire lady and decapitate her with his second attack with a slashing move around to her neck. And he was the only musketeers in this encounter to not he did not was not shaken by the fearsome monster in front of him, so he had no penalty to fight also. So and of course the having killed the monster that influenced Captain Daufroy and having helped him to clean his affliction, he was under the influence of the vampire. They return back to the camp and then later outside the city. Captain Daufroy and Louise had their conversation, clearing things up, and Louise made sure that Captain Daufroy's reputation and loyalty to the king was pure, and it was not under the influence of this creature of darkness now. So they exchanged some stuff. Louise gave our musketeers some little gift. Martin received a necklace with some mystical properties in it. Briska received an invitation, or rather a possibility to make a connection with somebody higher than him, a dame called Mange Homme that could introduce him to higher parties and courtly game of court, if he's able to survive her first and figure out this woman. I kind of have a good idea of who this woman is and what's her deal. So that would be a small adventure in itself. um, and Philippe received Dame Louise' friendship, and that's all she could give him. They did not develop a rapport in this mission. Philippe missed his role to connect with the lady, let's say, but she still offered him his support and friendship in the future. Philippe, is very combat intense and adventure driven, so the social stuff isn't his bag per se. So, and off our musketeer went into the sunset, or rather the, the sun rising above the horizon, and 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 our heroes sunset into the horizon back to Paris. And I did two small cutscenes at the end. One cutscenes were just to explain that Louise de Lafayette is a real historical character persona. She was one of King Louis' favorite. She was not a courtesan per se, but she was inclined to fate as the king, and later she became a nun and became known as Sister Angelique of de Lafayette. So yeah, they met an historical figure, but since it's our game, all bets were off, and if she had to die from Captain Daufroy's hand, or the vampire lady, that was on the table, of course. That's our Paris, that's our France, that's our version of this world. So here's some notes about the Game Master side of it. So let's start with the adventure structure first. So I designed the game to be very simple. I didn't want to make a two-parter of this adventure, since we have difficulties to orchestrate or time ourselves to play. It's very inconvenient. I think Ivan have a night shift. Francois has a bigger family than mine, and Anthony is living on the other side of the sphere. So it's quite difficult to organize and time our session. So I didn't want to extend this game too much. So I made the story very simple, very linear, and one shots should be linear anyway. This is a small campaign, but since we play on a almost bi-monthly or monthly basis, it's kind of hard to consider this activity as a tightly knit campaign. So I designed it like a one shot, and so the plot was very straightforward, but it has kind of a twist to it. They did not had to find themselves the captain. Their real mission was just to protect this lady on the war front of France. So the complexity of this plot came from by their desire to protect this lady, but this lady had to go in some dangerous places, and they could have asked Lady Louise to stay behind and go investigate and find the captain themselves. The story would have been a little bit different, but I think it was Martin who refers to Louise as having a real musketeer's heart, and this is something that I liked about this story, something that we discover about this lady while playing. So So yeah, a simple adventure, and I think it's better that way. More complex intrigue, and would have made this game longer in details, and would have removed some pieces of action. Uh, I wanted also to have at least 2 fights into the game, and that I achieved that, and I'm very cool with that. I'm very pleased with the result. Um, as another note about sequel possibility of a sequel, um, I kind of do that all all the times in my games, home games, anyways. So I could not help myself to include some details in the session to be exploited by a possible future sequel. Details that may or may not be used. It's not important. Um, I need to. It's something that I like to have an impact on a small project like that. So Briscoe, for instance, has a way now to enter a bigger level of intrigue via Madame Mange Homme, aka Mangeuse d'Homme, which means man eater in French. Philippe can now buy Louise as a contact, making that NPC available maybe for in the future. Uh, it doesn't have to be mechanical. It doesn't have to be bought. Louise is part of our campaign now, and Captain Daufroy also. Um, and for the vampire lady, it's herself. They learn at the end of the game by the captain that her name was Alice von Barsov, a lady from Romania, and she had a satchel with documents in it and stuff. And at the end of the game, in a cutscene, Mr. de Treville read the documents and did his investigation on it. And he discovered that the lady was working for a man named Von Dracul. Of course, you can figure out who this guy is. And she was sent in Strasbourg to cause to help war erupt and cause trouble on the large scale. And Martin uh, uh, read correctly that situation or that intent. So that would sure make a great sequel to find other agent of that Von Dracul and resolve all kinds of problems that this mastermind behind the screen, way behind the enemy line, the enemy lines, is doing. So in a campaign, I would make sure that this name would come up time and time again. In fact, my original idea for the session or the story was to send the musketeer behind the enemy lines and deal with a vampire. But I felt that keeping the game in France would make a better story. I even juggled with the idea of making all this happen in Paris and make it our first game in the actual city of Paris. But I needed the war front and the military guys and the chaos. I needed that environment. So unless I made the Bavarian army like march a couple of days west and try to take over Paris, uh, that was not going to happen. So I prefer to move the story outside. So, as Anthony said, Von Dracul could be an adversary worthy of our character's talent and be a true mastermind. And I think they would have to go in Romania or Transylvania to find him and confront him. But that would be like a suicide mission. But musketeers are always up for suicide missions. They, it's a great occasion to gain glory, of course. My last note about the game would be that Philippe is one mean machine. I wish I had prepared more for this character, who is very efficient in combat. In the last encounter, the consequences were and I'm talking just mechanically here. Martin was not able to finish his spell because the combat ended very quickly. But Anthony said that it's always happening in Ubiquity base game anyway, or in All for One at least. Second consequences was that Alice, the vampire lady, wasn't able to gloat maliciously and give more information about our presence in Strasbourg and gloat about their demise and such. I hadn't time to roleplay the monster more. So the fight ended very quickly. It's not something that bothers me as much when I run Savage World, for example. It's not rare to place a master villain on the table, a wild card, and the next round he's gone, just because of the wildness of the dice roll exploding and all kinds of bonuses and bennies flying around. So it's not something that bothered me. I would have preferred to have maybe one or two extra round just to raise tensions and allow Martin to finish to finish his spell, and maybe give the occasion for Briscar to earn some style points, maybe healing some wounds to desperately take another part in the combat. He was basically out before the combat began. So it's one of those situations where we have one character who is very good at what he does, and he's a talented young guy like D'Artagnan. He's supposed to be this sword master god. So I should have studied the PCs more, the player characters sheet a little bit more. Our character sheet currently are spread around. I have one in paper format, electronic format. Francois and Ivan have paper format, and Anthony has like an Excel spreadsheet. So it's all spread around. It's not formatted in the same way. I should have just gathered all the character sheet, centralized them in one place, and maybe it would have been easier to analyze the capability of each character, so I could sense or guess that something like that could happen. So when you know what your player can do, you can prepare accordingly and design more meaningful challenge or raise tension or introduce new elements. So what I should have done maybe is maybe had a couple of vampire minions to occupy Philippe for a couple of rounds to make the scene, but that would have made the scene more complex just a little. Maybe one or two minions to occupy our power machine, or mean blade. Or I could have made Alice a bit more robust. Armor in Ubiquity is added dice to a defense. I could have done that. I could have doubled her hit points. I could have introduced some form of damage soaking. Thinking about Savage World, I could have made her invulnerable to attacks unless the attack was from a source of her weakness, like Holy Water, Cross, Fate, Decapitation, Wooden Stake through the Heart. that could have caused damage, and everything else no damage at all. So those are a lot of solutions that I could have used, and I was too busy running the game to figure out that and fix that, not that problem, but that situation, to make maybe the last scene a little bit more challenging, little bit more tense. Philippe was the wild card who basically resolved the scene in 2 rounds and 2 dice rolls. So yeah, so that was my review recap, call it what you will, of last night's game. So thanks for watching, and see you next time.